Hey there, fellow aviators! I have just conquered my commercial check ride, and what a journey that was. Over the next 45 minutes, I will tell you about every thrilling moment I had on my check ride. Stay tuned to hear about my flight portion, about how long it took, and about that nail-biting moment where I almost didn't make it. Trust me, you don't want to miss that one. If aviation inspires you, hit that like and subscribe button to stay updated on my new videos and my progress towards the CFI and CFAA ratings that I am currently working on. My name is Dimitri. Let's dive in. I took my check ride in October 2024 in Albany Municipal Airport, that is a Sierra 12 airport, located in Oregon, just about 50 miles south of the Hillsborough. And on the morning of check ride, I had to take that flight from the airport where I rent to the Albany where the DPE was expecting me for the check ride. Now, I have to say, that actually is a good warm-up. In the morning, I go through the pre-flight, I flew and I did a few maneuvers, and just not too much, because airplane certainly behaves differently when you have less weight, when you have less passengers in it. So don't over-refresh it if you're flying on a lightly loaded airplane. Now, I would be wrong not to mention which airplane I use for my prep and for my check ride. It was that RV-12IS, that very same airplane that you can see as of today, or if you go onto the Vans aircraft website, then choose aircraft and go RV-12IS, look at the tail sign. This airplane actually belonged to the Vans family. They used it, they built it, certified it, they used it for as a demo model for their training purposes, 317 Victor Alpha. And there you go, 317 Victor Alpha. Amazing airplane, full glass cockpit, autopilot, G3X with a 650 for the head unit for navigation. Love it. My favorite airplane so far from everything that I have flown. Well, of course, there'll be more airplanes, but so far, love it. Now, on to the check ride. When you are taking a private pilot check ride, you probably were told it's 4, 5, 6 hours. Well, commercial would be even longer than that. So prep ahead, get some snacks, get some water. Oh, yes, and dress up nicely. Part of the commercial pilot exam is that next level of piloting overall. It actually starts with how you talk, how you dress. It also includes you being smooth on maneuvers, being gentle on your passengers, and maybe even polite as well. So do think of how you dressed for your commercial check ride. Now, as I was flying into the Albany for landing, I heard that somebody is doing a VOR approach. Well, there were a couple clouds, but not that bad. There was no reason to fly VOR approach, especially since they have RNAV approach. Come on. Sure enough, that was a previous check ride, instrument check ride, that the same DPE was concluding with a student. I made sure to have my perfect announced pattern entry, clear communication, and with my accent, sure enough, the DPE have heard me on the radio, and I bet that my check ride began sooner than I saw the person face to face. Because remember, part of commercial check ride is your next level of aviation abilities overall, which includes you communicating on the radio, of course. Once I land, I went inside the lobby and took some time to chill down, relax, and refresh on the plan, and maybe even a couple acronyms, because the moment we were done with the paperwork, which, by the way, there was a lot, there's always something. That's a topic for a separate video. Once you're done with your paperwork, confirmed all your hours, endorsements, etc., that your name is correct, your middle name is correct and not missing. But now, the first topic, we went through the Aviate's acronym, me spelling out the durations of those inspections, and went through the air, of course, that you need, what you need in a plane, what you need on the pilot. So pretty standard questions. That's consider that your warm-up for the Checkride oral part. Then next we jump into the next standard question. Well, what are those inspections for the plane? And for the light sport aircraft, the LSA, the Vans aircraft, the aviation airworthiness directives do not apply. They have service bulletins. Since it's a light sport, FAA doesn't get the power to mandate them, but any respectful mechanic would follow the service bulletins and have them done. So we have spent time talking through what they are and what they mean, and why would you follow them. Like, there is a good reason to have your plane up to date on the service bulletins. Now, at the same time, we checked all the service records for the airplane that I flew in, making sure that it has inspections passed and the other documents are all in order. Kind of related to that, we start going into the scenario-based questioning. So let's say that somebody offers me a job, like, hey, Dmitry, I see you have a commercial pilot license. Can you fly me to a football game? Here's my plane, Cessna 172. What do I check? I go through the arrow. Then what's the situation? Can I accept this job? Was I holding out? Is this legal? Could this be a common carriage kind of, or private carriage situation? And in this case, as a current commercial pilot license that is certified and rated in that airplane, yes, I can accept that job for a person who approaches me directly. But was this a holding out situation? It really depends, because word of mouth could be considered holding out. If you are going around every party like a true pilot, you'll tell everyone that you are a pilot, and at some moment everyone knows you are a pilot and you are accepting jobs. This could be a path into the holding out situation, so be careful there. But now there's something else that DP actually didn't see coming. The example he gave me is this dude is going to a football game and going to have quite a few beers. I need to bring him home. Well, if he's still intoxicated, the 91 part .17 prohibits me from taking passengers who appear to be intoxicated. So if I don't know that he's been drinking and he does not appear intoxicated, that's fine. But the moment he tells me, not so sure. Got to be careful about those questions as well in your piloting life. Next, we jump onto the medical certificate, and oh my god, I screwed that one up. And of course, I studied that, and my CFI has been through this with me, but something just didn't click. Nervousness or whatever. The moment where I failed is confusing the validity for a year versus till the last day of the month. Specifically, medical certificate is valid for the remainder of the month of issue, plus whatever your 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years for younger under 40 guys, 40 years old. So we dug into this a little bit just to kind of have a conversation and understand the logic behind it. And the logic is simple. As a commercial pilot, you dedicate yourself a month of, let's say, June to have your medical done. 1 year you may be going there for June 1st, and technically you're valid for like that, say 12 months for a second class medical, 12 months plus 30 days. You will be valid for a 12-month and to the end of June the following year. In other years, you'd go into your medical on June 30th, and then you maybe run in to the medical on the June 1st, so you technically have less than 12 months. Idea is you have that whole month of June to pick your date when you are not flying, when you are not busy, and just go in and get it done. There is that 30-ish days of flexibility that you get. That makes perfect sense. Those kind of things make me personally remember things easier. Next, we jumped into the sectional charts, like this piece here around the Portland International. There are some power lines, some other markings down below, just general stuff. What's this, what's that? Now again, I came to the point where being nervous, like, oh my God, I was preparing for this all my year. You see this Troutdale Airport here, that's a class Delta, a Delta up to 2,500 MSL, and it's underneath the shelf of the class Charlie. And right now, if I'd be asked, well, what's the ceiling of the class Delta over the Troutdale Airport, I would say, well, of course it's just below 1,700 feet. Well, at that moment I kind of screwed that up a little bit, so we had to have a conversation and talk through. It's 2,500 feet here, but only 17 here and 2,000 there. So just don't be too stressed about this. It's okay to be nervous. You will screw up something, but as long as you know this, you'll get to the right answer. And I'm sure you all spent a lot of time preparing for the commercial check ride by now. So just work hard and do your best. Next, pretty expected, although not really applicable to most of the planes we fly, is the oxygen requirements at 91.211 supplemental oxygen. And those pressure levels, they're kind of easy to remember: 12.5, 14, 15. What happens if you go higher? What is hypoxia? We kind of touched a little bit onto the medical factors again, and spoke about that at night. There's a greater sensitivity because your roads, they just consume more. So between the night vision and the day vision. Anyway, so we touched on all that stuff. It's good to know, useful data, and we moved on. Now that kind of led us into the next question. Again, all DPs are asked to have the check ride in form of scenarios. So he literally said, hey Dimitri, well, what if you won the lottery and there's $5 million that burning hole in your pocket and you're getting yourself a 2015 Pilatus? Can you fly it? And so using that scenario, we went over the fact that you need a high performance endorsement. Not a big deal, pretty easy to get. You need a complex aircraft endorsement, a retractable gear. Again, pretty easy, couple hours, maybe less. Then you need high altitude endorsement, which will involve some reading, some practicing, how to use the oxygen systems, etc. And then, on top of that, you will need a transition training. Pilatus is a complex airplane. Not just FAA definition complex, but actually is something that requires a lot of respect. So you need to get trained into that. You'll need to know who can do that training, what to expect, how you log that. And so you will go over those kind of questions with your DP. Now, once you're done with all those endorsements, there is no more type rating or any other training required. As a Part 91 pilot, you can fly that beautiful airplane all you want. Next, we went into the airport signs and markings. DPE brought up a slide deck or some website that had a lot of markings, and they wouldn't have description, of course. So he'd point to a sign and tell me, like, well, that 15-APCG, what does it mean? What do you do? What do you do not do? ILS, the B with the arrow, etc. So get all your airport signs and markings. What's on the pavement? What does it do? What are you allowed to do and what you're not? So probably pretty common stuff, and if you've been flying, you should know all this by now. I got that one to 100% correct rate on the Checkride. Feels good. Next, the dice came out, literally. I don't know if those dice are built for the DPs or produced, or that he actually ordered those custom, because you can with any text and any shape. Those dice had like 10 or 12 different sides. They were far from cubical. But you roll the dice and then you just address the topic that you rolled. I rolled hypoxia, hyperventilation, so we went back to that hypemic, hypoxic, all that, how it happens, what to do, and what not to do. On the weather, I got winds, lenticular clouds, high-low pressure areas, how the jet stream is affected by this low and high pressure areas. And again, this is another one where I had a gap. It looks logical right now. Looking back, like, oh, of course, you look on the map, there's a high pressure area, it spirals down and then extends outward, and so north of the high pressure, it's rotating clockwise, so you're better off flying kind of west to east. And so the jet stream follows those high and low pressure areas exactly. If it will go north of the high pressure area and then south of the low pressure area, if I didn't misspoke. So anyway, took me a few minutes to clear off that embarrassment. But again, on your Checkride, there will be questions for most of you that you get wrong. It's not the end of the world. Just carry on. You'll probably be helped to correct the answer and move on like nothing happened. Show the best that you have. Mountain wave turbulence, we saw a couple amazing pictures that he brought up about those lenticular clouds and what to expect on the downwind side of the mountain, how the turbulence can throw the planes upside down. Mountain flying is a separate skill. You really have to be knowledgeable if you're flying in the mountains in the windy days. A little bit of atmosphere, what's stable. I drew the parcel of air that's ascending and either being lifted further, meaning unstable, or being pushed back where it belongs, that is a stable. And again, he brought up a scenario-based question, asking me, well, I got into that marginal weather, it's really getting bad and I need to land. So I offered to use special VFR, and we spoke about needing to stay clear of clouds and 1 mile visibility. Next dice was for the systems, and I think I was getting systems that don't even exist in my light sport aircraft. We spoke about the Rotax 912 IS engine, and it's a lovely piece of equipment if you haven't flown one. It's a full FedEx, so it's a full authority digital controlled engine. And there's one handle, no lean mixture, no carb heat. It's just clean working piece of equipment. One question that surprised me is what's so special about the wings of an RV? And I was like, well, they have a little bit of dihedral, they're square, they have flaperons. That's pretty special. I can't recall any other planes that have flaperons. But the answer was they come off. They actually do come off. This plane is built so that you can put it in a 20-foot garage. There's a huge, big stick, I don't have a better word, that goes through the spar on the inside of the plane, and even a small micro switch to electrically signal that lock mechanism is properly engaged. Once you take it out, the whole wing comes off. You can put those on the floor in the garage and then roll an airplane onto the wings, like on top of the wings, and close the gate. Lovely. But yes, that is special. You need to make sure those wings don't come off in flight. Now that wing conversation kind of led us nicely into the cross-country plan and then into going outside and doing the pre-flight inspection. But first, about the cross-country plan. I have mostly used for flight. And yes, I know even 10 years ago, for flight didn't exist. Even until now, many DPs would insist on you doing the nav log by hand. It's a good skill. I'm able to prove that. But in real life, come on, you're really unlikely to be using that. You're flying Portland to whatever, Seattle. Would you be doing a pen and paper navlog with using all this wind correction? No. Well, you need to know how to use it, but would you be really doing that? No. So from the DP standpoint, he wants to make sure that you get your license, you walk out of the door, and you're not getting in trouble. So for flight, it is printed a navlog. We went over the plan. What do I plan? How do I land? What's my alternate? And it actually went very quick because I think I have a little bit of a know-how on this, because I had all those details printed in a Word document file. I used Northwest Craft and W Craft to get all the data, and I literally put it in a Word document, and before going to the Checkride, printed that and had it presented to my DP. Being organized is a big deal. I did have all my documents, even that navlog, printed, and I had all the details separately available for the DP to go through. Weight and balance, I did have it on paper as well as in a for-flight, and we did a little bit of discussing. I was given a scenario. You can see there's a hand drawing of, well, what happens if we are seeing different points on this envelope diagram. But then here is the preparation. We have it on my screen. We are flying from Albany to Spokane. We have the date, October 14, 12:30, total flight time. I wrote out what I learned about airports. We have some visual checkpoints that I'm using along the way. I'm picking the route at 9,500 feet. Better fuel efficiency and safety margin, but I'm not picking direct path because of the mountains. I'm staying down low. Well, actually, I'm staying pretty high, but above the low terrain of the river and then above the valley. That gives me a bigger margin for safety. Weight and balance, that's the one I printed and that we had for a few questions. Then NOTAMs, again, what I was able to get on the evening before the Checkride weather briefing. All the findings that I had, I just spelled them out. And when I bring this to a DP and say, hey, Mr. DP, here's my full flight prep, ready to go. That went pretty easy on me. What else? Fuel requirements, what I calculated. We need 10 gallons for that with reserve, plus taxi, plus this, that. So with a 20-gallon tank, we were able to get those 326 nautical miles trip done with even fuel to spare. And by the way, I would leave my airport full because it has cheap fuel. Fuel is much more expensive to the place where we're going. So you might as well bring extra, because those extra 6 gallons would be no factor in terms of extra weight, but it will save me a few bucks on fueling up with a cheaper fuel in Albany versus Spokane. Again, we discussed that. I think it's a good judgment. It's something that you as a commercial pilot will need to think of. What else? We spoke about alternates. There were a lot. Runway length, I just spelled them out. Odessa, okay. Takeoff landing performance, again, we are looking at PUH 5.6, 1589 feet to land, 1672 feet to clear 50 foot on takeoff. Looking at density, elevation at certain temperature, and that portion really went quick. Kind of led me into that CAS versus TAS versus indicated speed situation. And once again, do I know this? Yes. Can I teach this on my set of my CFI lessons? Yes. But when I was asked by the DP, I'm like, well, the air is less dense, so your speed indication is lower, and I just completely lost it. We had to start drawing some air molecules on the board, and just slowly go through this question until I produced correct answer, which maybe took the whole 5 minutes. And yes, flying at higher altitudes, your airplane being at the same indicated airspeed is flying a lot faster through indicated speed. Although engine is producing a lot less thrust. Now, when I was digging into this later, turbofan engines, like what you have on your commercial jetliners, flying at 39,000 feet, produces only third of the rated thrust. Well, again, their engines differ a little bit, but in general, you're only getting 1/3 of engine thrust when you're flying at 39,000 feet. So that's a good question to know and to be really comfortable with before you go on a check ride. Could I have failed myself on this question? Probably not. But did I feel embarrassed? Oh yeah, still do. Well, next came the flight portion. So we walk out to an airplane. Of course, we do the pre-flight inspection, and I get all those questions on what's this, what's that. I did get a question on the anti-collision lights and the beacon, but there is no beacon in the rudder area, which begs the question: do you actually require that? Well, you go back into the far aim, you have to have anti-collision lights, and as long as those lights are there and visible, and you have them on, that counts. But well, a little bit of a segue. So, flying portion. Before we started an engine, we talked through the full flight scenario. There were no surprises to be had except maybe emergency, which did happen as a task simulated. So short field takeoff, that's how we start. Depart on the planned cross country, the cross country that I have prepared. And I was given an option: do I file or do I get my DP to simulate ATC, which I chose. Then comes diversion, then a soft field landing, then soft field takeoff, stay in the pattern, normal landing, touch and go. Then we are off to do the maneuvers: steep turns, chandelles, slow flight, accelerated stalls, emergency descents, aids on pylons, and then go back to the home airport for short field landing with whatever takeoff, and a final scary power of 180. You know how they say, when people say that power of 180 is a scariest maneuver? Well, that's all correct. It wasn't so for me. I used to sleep. I come in high and sleep into the landing, but yes, people do fail power of 180. Now, last but not least is you taxi back and park and shut down the airplane without screwing up at the last moment. And there are ways: if you taxi too fast, if you taxi off the taxiway, if you create a emergency situation by not observing traffic, you can literally pass everything else and then screw up your check ride when you're taxiing back to the parking. So don't do that. Now let's look at how my flight portion actually went. With all that discussed, we jump on a plane, I go through my safety checklist, explain roles, how we transfer controls if we need to. I ask DP to watch for traffic, and then I do all the rest. I did not get him to read my checklist, which I could have and should have. Keep it in mind, at least ask if that's okay. It's a crew resource management after all, why not? We do a short field takeoff, I level off in a pattern, and I only resume climb after I'm leaving the pattern on a downwind. Aim is not super specific on the pattern exit, except direct and a 45 on the upwind, but it also has a line that applies. You have to be at pattern altitude while in the pattern. So people who are climbing while on the downwind, they run into risks as well as they show lack of professionalism, and that could get you failed. So watch your altitude. I was quizzed on the G3X indicators and data sources, and After getting all those correct, this is a screen of the G3X, by the way. You can see there is an angle of attack indicator, which is the actual little pressure sensor that's processed by computer. It's a great system, love it. And apparently some people believe that the speed on the left is coming from the GPS. Yeah, those kind of questions would be very embarrassing if you fail them. Once we were done with quizzing on an airplane, diversion came in. The DP says, okay, we have to divert. Let's hit Selim. I use onboard aviation. I back it up with ForeFlight. I calculate roughly how far the airport is, how much fuel, how much time. You don't have to be precise. You just have to ballpark that. I dial in the weather, and once I have the weather, I contact the tower. And it was a little bit rushed. We had less than 10 minutes, really. It was like 10 miles out of between where I was and Selim. So I was so close to the class Delta that I had to rush through this. Could I have been a little clearer on communication? Yes. But again, you just keep improving as a pilot. And yeah, thank you for all the advice to the CFIs that I flew with, Brian including, and Derek and Sam, everyone, really everyone have been so helpful, and I learned from every one of you. But I still kind of screwed up that clearness of communication on the Checkride. Not too bad, but just enough to say, yeah, could have done better. Tower comms, we come into Selim for landing. We do a just perfect soft field landing with like really soft wheelies and the roll out, and the front wheel stays in the ground, in the air. The nose wheel stays in the air long enough. And then comes the next something I want to talk about. As I roll out, I have my real long rollout on the runway. I start getting those taxi instructions like, hey, RB317 Victor Alpha, take Alpha, something, then taxi something, then hold short this, hold short that. And I'm like, what? Say again? And I start trying to look at my map, and I'm like, then Alpha something, hold short what? All that time, I keep rolling on the runway, losing speed, slowly exiting the runway, but still ahead of the whole short line. What I should have said is stand by and just do my thing. Clean up the airplane, cross the whole short line, stop, get the flaps up, get whatever else I need to do, and then call ground for instructions or tower. Again, those are the things that a commercial pilot has to be perfect at. It was a good learning moment. I didn't do anything that could have failed me, but that's just another of those situations where I could have done better. Next came the pattern work. We stayed in Selim, soft field takeoff, full pattern, touch and go landing, and then off to the practice area. I flew the great pattern. I worked with the tower. Nothing else went wrong. I learned my lesson very quick on that. And so really nothing special. You're flying every day, you know how to fly. Just give your DP a great ride and you'll do okay. Well, next came maneuvers. And the weather was, this is a actual real picture from me flying on that day, just before the Checkride. We had a lot of broken clouds at about 2,000. That was pretty clear up to, I think, 6 or 7. But Oregon that time of year is just very patchy. It's great in one place, it's completely overcast in another. So the short takeaway on maneuvers is don't forget your checklists and clearing turns. And take your time. The whole maneuver Checkride portion took me about 40 minutes. And that was me taking my time. The whole flight portion was an hour and a half. Another important takeaway is you verbalize your actions. You want your DP to know that you're not just getting lucky, but you are doing what you intend to do, and the plane is flying how you want it to fly. So that's really helpful general advice. And of course, I did save the track from the whole check ride. So here we are departing Albany. Here's my initial climb out. Get briefly at a pattern altitude and then on to 2,500. Diverting to Selim, getting the weather, coming into class Delta. There's my first landing. Then you'll see once I do, there's my base, there's final. I landed, and then there was just a long, complicated taxi. All those instructions that stalled me while I was still on the runway. Once I get to the departure area for runway, was it, I believe, 16. Get the checklists done, depart, do another pattern, land. There's my second landing, a touch and go, and then off to the practice area. Or at least whatever the area outside of class Delta that was allowing us to practice. There's a quick clearing turns and then a steep turn, and I just did one to the left and then, oh, actually one to the right as well. Next, there was a clearing turn, then one chandelle to the left. You see the altitude gain, then stabilize. Good. Then I was told to do slow flight. Yep, you can see the speed was down in the 50s, a little bit of a slow flight, and then done back to level flight. Accelerated stall, again, clear the area and do a accelerated stall on the left turn. It's like real quick, put in the bank, indicate the stall, then unload the wings, unbank the airplane back onto level flight. So that was pretty easy. Emergency descent, where is it? So there is me dropping the altitude sharply. There you go. So down to 1,000 feet in an emergency descent. Then, yeah, I think I only did 2 full turns. Again, DP told me, hey, don't worry, the weather is kind of low ceilings. We can't climb as high as we'd like to, so give me 2 full turns and I'll count that in. Then we are proceeding towards Albany, and next I was looking for that 8 on pylons, and this is where I get to another moment of slight embarrassment. As I'm doing those 8 on pylons at 1,000 feet, the ground elevation was a little higher in that area, and maybe I came in a little too low in the first place. The weather was pretty turbulent, and I have to say that I lost more altitude than I should have. And then at some moment, the G3X says 500. I'm like, yeah, great. If you've been practicing 8 on pylons, you know under no reasonable speed you would be as low as 500 AGL. I quickly commented on that and corrected that back to an altitude. One of those other moments that, since everything else was more or less perfect, this wasn't a big enough deal to fail me, but certainly something I remember as the moment of slight embarrassment. Getting that 500 call out on 8 on pylons is not a good thing. And the DP never mentioned anything about that maneuver. I saw him cross-checking the speed, altitude, and looking at the pylon, so he definitely paid attention on my performance, and my pylon was more or less on my target, on my wing target all the time. And so we went off to Albany. And then, of course, as I climbed out, The DP tells me simulated engine failure, and that was the only maneuver that wasn't discussed. It came as a surprise. And here comes another teachable moment. We are so firmly taught to follow the checklist that if you have an emergency, you pull out your checklist, you follow those items, and you really need to have them memorized, but still you follow those items. But we discussed it later with the DP in a debriefing. If you're losing an engine, if it actually stops, which he announced, the engine has stopped, there's probably such a big reason that unless you accidentally pulled your fuel valve, or you flipped your magnetos, or in this case, lane A and lane B, both of them at the same time, unless there's something obvious like that, so you went through your fuel, your ignition, your throttle setting, if none of those were off and they didn't help, you're not getting your engine back. And unless you're flying at 12,000 feet and have all the time in the world, next thing you focus on is finding a good landing spot. Now, next kind of mistake that I did is I was gliding to my landing spot and I had to change my mind at the last moment because I realized I can't make it. My plan was to find that ideal landing spot to which I can glide. And he said, like, look, I saw you slip the plane. You can come in real steep and land on a spot. Why in the world wouldn't you land to whatever is the closest field instead of gliding all that way and risking coming in short with some power lines ahead of the airfield? And that was a great learning moment. In a debrief, really just get your plane down to the soonest landing spot if you have an emergency. And then we touched back on that attempt of go through the checklist of mixture that, lanes this, crank the engine, if no restart, do something else. You only do that if you're really happy with your landing plan and you really have time left. Otherwise, if your engine just stopped in flight, it's not coming back to life more than likely. So that was a good teaching moment. Now from there, from emergency descent and simulated almost landing at, say, 500 feet altitude, we climb back up and head back home for those last set of maneuvers. The power of 180, big deal, and it just went perfect. I came in high, I slipped to the landing, I nailed my spot within 100 feet of the second stripe, and then I taxi back without screwing up anything else on the way. Park the plane, get the new license, and of course, those of you who've taken the Checkride, you know that you'll get a hole punched in your old pilot certificate. I misspoke. Those are, of course, certificates, not licenses. So the takeaway is just do your best. Do your best and realize that being nervous is okay. It is a big milestone in your aviation career. You will be nervous. I wouldn't ever tell you just to relax or just don't be nervous. You will be. But if your instructor has signed you off for a check ride, you're ready. Just go and do your best. If you make a small mistake, just move on. Explain if you have something to say, meaning what you did, what went wrong, what should have been differently, and move on. Show the best that you have to the DP. Now, of course, if you land short on your power of 180, that's a fail. You will come back and redo that maneuver the following day. It's fine. But most other maneuvers are pretty subjective. You have to be consistently outside of the standards to be failed for like a slight altitude deviation in a steep turn. Unless you're really that bad, you won't fail it. In which case, I bet your CFI wouldn't have signed you off. So, if you are signed off for a check ride, go do your best. show how you fly that airplane, and you'll pass. Good luck to all of you in your check rides, and thanks. Subscribe to my channel. There'll be more teaching and educational and otherwise interesting videos, and I'll be sharing my experience as I go through my career. See you in the skies.